This podcast is a member of the New York City Podcast Network at nycpodcastnetwork.com. Visit us to listen to over 250 amazing podcasts just like this one.
Japanese street style is some of the cutest and trendiest clothing in the world. Introducing Cherry Goddess Women's Clothing and Accessories, the hottest original and cute clothing company. We offer tops, clothes, accessories, shoes, dresses and skirts, and comfortable homeware that we guarantee you will love. Cherry Goddess Women's Clothing, super cute Japanese style clothing.
Yeah, this is Jeffrey Frazier from Black Wall Street Chronicles, and we back at it again. I just want to wish everybody Happy New Year, and I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. Right now is January 11th, 2020. I decided I'm going to date the show, and I wanted to talk about the craziest today. I wanted to talk about the craziest story I heard over the holidays. I want to talk about the poor young black girl that lied about her kidnapping just to get out so she won't have to go back to Honduras. Being that I am from the Bronx, that's actually more common than you think. Usually when people come from Central America or Caribbean, and they're over here and they're not doing the right thing, they're not doing what they're supposed to do as kids, so what the parents usually do to punish them is to send them back home. And yeah, I'm going to talk more into it. Also, we're going to talk about sex trafficking in New York City. We're also talk about, there's also a Sagittarius dynamic, because apparently this young 16-year-old girl was in a relationship with a grown 26-year-old man. And we also got to talk about crying wolf and how that's not good, and the sex trafficking issues that's going on, how black women and black children are victims of sex trafficking in the African American community. So there's a lot to unwrap today, folks. Before we go on the break, I want to talk about a couple of things where you can follow me. I will have video clips on my podcast on my Instagram, which is Black Kage 840. That's my Instagram page. It's Black Kage 840. You can also go to my bios link. My bios link will, on my Instagram, on Black Kage 840, will have my Twitter, will have my Facebook page, and it will also have my Twitch account. Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll be back shortly. Yes, this is Jeffrey Frazier of Black Wall Street Chronicles, and we are back at it again. So, I'm going to read an article in the Time magazine. The article is called "A Bronx Teen Reportedly Faked Her Own Kidnapping." The article is by Josiah Bates, and it was updated December 17, 2019. So I'm going to read this article, and we're basically going to go on a wrap. What this article is saying. The missing teen girl who appeared to be abducted while walking with her mother has been found and is back home, police confirmed to Time. But Carol Sanchez, 16, told police that her terrifying disappearance was all a hoax, according to the New York Times. Shortly after she was found Tuesday afternoon, she was questioned by officers. Sanchez alleged kidnapping, which prompted an Amber Alert and a steady stream of news, was a stunt staged because she was angry with her mother, the Times reports. One police officer said that Sanchez described her mother as overprotective. You mean your mother is so overprotective that you actually have to stage this stunt to punish her? She needs to get slapped across the face. No, that's not. I don't mean that. Yes, I do. A police officer says that the girl's family was considering moving back to their native Honduras, but the teenager wanted to remain in the U.S., Time reports. Her disappearance unnerved New Yorkers after the disturbing video released by the New York Police Department earlier Tuesday showed what looks like two men grabbing and kidnapping Sanchez off the street. Police are still deciding whether the men involved in the setup will face criminal charges, reports the Times. Two men then got out of the car, grabbed Sanchez, and dragged her into the vehicle, according to the police. They drove away, leaving Sanchez's mother at the scene. They have the article. They have the Twitter feed when they instantly put out the alert. So I'm gonna read it. NYPD 40th Precinct. Yeah, I know this precinct. Seeking immediate information in regards to a kidnapping last night in the vicinity of Eagle Avenue and East 156th Street. 16-year-old Carol Sanchez was walking with her mother when four men in a beige sedan forced her into their vehicle and fled the scene. Any info, please. 1-800-5-STOP-5. 1-800-577-TIPS. Authorities added that there were two additional men in the car. All of them were wearing dark clothing. The NYPD has so far declined to provide details on how Sanchez was found. Okay, so we're basically going to unwrap this. This actually kind of reminds me of a story. And it's funny. Eagle Avenue and 156th Street, that is around the same area that this story happened. When I was a teenager, my boy from high school, he told me the story of, he lives over in Melrose Projects, which actually is in the same area of this particular kidnapping, right? So when we was younger, we was living in Melrose Projects, right? And he said he was at this party, and this is when we men and women, when we have children, we need to really talk to them about the responsibilities of having sexual relations with another person. So this young lady who was a teenager, about 15, 16 years old, she had sexual relations with another teenage boy. They used condoms and protection and all that, so everything was safe and consensual. The minute that she had sex with this boy, she psychologically was not able to handle that, and she ended up having sexual relationships with a couple of teenage boys. It got so bad that she actually was caught performing sex acts on the playground in Melrose Projects. When her parents basically figured out what she was doing, they basically sent her back home to the Caribbean. Yeah, this is the story that happens, in the Bronx when it comes to... this happens all the time for some reason where I come from. And another thing to unwrap here, there's rumors that the gentleman that she was having relationship with was 26 years old, and that right there is a Sagittary rape, and there's a possibility that that gentleman may get in trouble. When you are a 25-year-old man and you're having sexual relations with a 16-year-old girl, you have a direct psychological advantage over that young girl. The young girl does not understand her body yet. She does not have the psychological capabilities to deal with a grown man yet. So this girl could be so she could be so enamored and infatuated with this 25, 26-year-old man that she would do something like this to basically undermine her mother. It's very bad. I have a personal story, back in the old days, and older members of my family used to tell me this. Back in the old days, if you was a young girl and you was 15, 16 years old and you got pregnant, you was basically considered to be an old woman. You was basically considered to be a grown woman, Yeah, so there was a lot of men back then in the old days that was 25, 30-year-old men, and they was basically taking advantage of a young teenage single mother who was 16 years old. There's actually stories of in the old days, young 15, 16-year-old girls that actually was a victim of sex trafficking. They was basically, they was pimped, and their bodies was solicited in the street. It's actually very sad. In the Carol Sanchez situation, when we live in New York City, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful in protecting our young girls. Even though this young lady lied, we're going to commend the NYPD and we're going to commend the media for thoroughly responding to this, because normally they don't respond to black women and black girls being victims of sex trafficking. And when we come back, I will read a couple of articles on the sex trafficking issues that goes on in the African American community. Thank you. This is Jeffrey Frazier from Black Wall Street Chronicles, and we back at it again. So, I'm going to read a couple of more articles that talk about black women who are victims of sex trafficking. Yeah, and so we can basically talk about these articles and unwrap what they're trying to tell us. Give me a moment. Okay. This article is from Great Grant Mass Makers for Girls of Color. The article is called "Sex Trafficking True Victims. Why are our black girls and black women so vulnerable?" Mimi Crown's story is like millions of others that have been and are being told across America. At age 21, she was abducted and forced into sexual solicitation. I had to ask permission to eat, to sleep, to buy myself feminine products, or even to use my phone, Crown said of her detention. It felt like I was in a prison that I'd never get out of. I had no limits on what I should have been doing. However, sexually, I secretly did what I could to mentally deal with this at the time. Sexual trafficking represents a critical threat to the well-being of this nation's girls. In 2016 alone, the National Human Trafficking Hotline reported 7,572 human trafficking cases, with 5,551 of these cases being sexual trafficking cases. One of the least acknowledged and underappreciated facts about the statistic, however, is that the face of the typical victim is not that of a J.C. Druggard or Amy Smart, as media depictions of sexual trafficking suggest. The typical face of sexual trafficking in America today matches the faces of the 501 juveniles that have gone missing in the D.C. area in just the first quarter of this year. According to the FBI, 40% of the victims of sex trafficking are African Americans, with the number being significantly larger in the major metropolitan areas. In Los Angeles County, the African American victim rate reaches 92%. In the overwhelming numbers, the persons most likely to be victimized are vulnerable black girls and women. Compared with other segments of the population, victimization rates for African American children and youths are even higher. The National Center for Victims of Crime reports, evidence suggests that black youths ages 12 to 19 are the victims of violent crime at significantly higher rates than the white peers. Black youths are 3 times more likely to be the victims of reported child abuse or neglect, 3 times more likely to be victims of robbery, and 5 times more likely to be victims of homicide. Per the FBI, 59% of all juvenile prostitution arrests involve African Americans, with law enforcement more likely to see a black sex trafficking victim as a prostitute and not as someone needing help. Trying to find solutions towards keeping our girls safe may require a radical examination of the core beliefs of America's society is currently based on. I actually did not know what human trafficking was until it happened to me. Crown, who wrote in the book Stuck in Traffic about her experiences, added, I was reading an article literally just last year about a young woman who was rescued for trafficking, and in the story, it gave details of what happened to her. I said, wow, that sounds just like what I went through. I would tell the politicians to stop treating victim survivors of human trafficking like criminals, she said. These women have gone through unimaginable ordeals, and the last thing they need is to have the finger being pointed at them. Did she rob someone? Yes. But she would not have done it if her pimp not first held a gun to her head. So stop judging and start helping. At the intersection. Understanding why American girls are being targeted requires taking a critical look of those that are actually taking the girls. Statistics show that African American men are overwhelmingly the individuals that kidnap and traffic the majority of America's sex trafficking victims. However, these traffickers are marketing and selling services of the victim to a largely white affluent base. Due to this, persecutions of offenders devolve into a question of credibility between a politically advantaged white officer and a vulnerable brown victim. Typically, the result of this is the victim being silenced and blamed for what she has done to her. For what was done to her. Most people who buy sex are those that have disposable income. They tend to be white men that are married that have an education. Marion Hatcher, the senior project manager and human trafficking coordinator for the Cook County Sheriff's Office of Public Policy, told Atlanta Black Star, quoting both national and internal research, "The people who are being brought are the people whose needs are not being met," which typically are African Americans. We are the ones that typically end up in the criminal justice system, so there are more of us that are involved in jail or juvenile detention. Hatcher, who was an adult, was subjected to sexual trafficking herself, attributes this to the nation's racial history, drawing parallels to the United States Department of Homeland's detention of human trafficking, which is modern-day form of slavery involving the illegal trade of people for exploitation or commercial gain. Hatchett argued that sex trafficking victims are typically treated as chattel property, similar to African Americans enslaved in the antebellum South. The mindset of being able to buy a person is a notion that is deeply ingrained in the American psyche and that is never really left despite changes in the legal reality. In 2010, the Urban Institute conducted research in attempting to estimate the size of the underground commercial sex market in the United States. In the report that was released in 2014 in 8 major American cities, Atlanta, Dallas, Denver, Kansas City, Miami, Seattle, San Diego, and Washington, the 2007 economic worth of the market per city was approximately $40 million and $290 million, with pimps and traffickers that participated in the study reporting taking home between $5,000 and $32,833 per week. The study found that while street-level solicitation has declined, the proliferation of social media and websites such as Blackpage.com and Craigslist.com, which has since publication of the report removes its adult sex services section, has led to greater proliferation of the solicitation of those involved in the sex trade. The logic of why someone would engage in sex trafficking is clear. Unlike drug trafficking, which deals in the selling of a consumable product, sex trafficking victim can be sold repeatedly and traded to other traffickers for the offer of protection, a venture, a better life, or an escape for the hardship of their current lives. Girls every day are willingly or forcibly placed into the possession of those that will sell access to their bodies. If one was to create a Venn diagram of the forces that influences sexual trafficking, one would see that 4 different phenomena are intersecting: white privilege, white access, racism, gender identity, gender objectification, and poverty. In order to find a valid solution to the question of the disproportionate way sex trafficking affect the African American community, each of these phenomena must be taken on. The problems lie in the fact that most Americans see the typical sex trafficking victim as a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl and the typical juvenile prostitution arrestee as the black woman. Hatcher added, "Most people don't realize that the two are the same person. It is often when a woman or child is exploited or prostituted, she may have to get services from agencies that are not culturally inclined. Nicole Daniels, founders of Survival on the Move and founding co-chair of the anti-sex trafficking community World Without Exploitation, said to Atlanta Black Star. Daniels has shared that she is a victim of sex trafficking. They are getting services from an agency that doesn't understand our history, typically a white social service agency. They are facing racism in the criminal justice system, being forced to pay higher restitution fees, getting more jail time, dealing with biased family services offers, and facing care plans that are difficult or impossible to complete. leading to a return to life and redecivism. Ugh, I can't pronounce that word. Okay. The full article is on Atlantic Black Star. Let me see if I can get the rest of it. This was written by Frederick Reese in 2017. Let me go pick up my pace. All right. Let me read this. If one was to create a Venn diagram of the forces that influence sex trafficking, one would see that 4 different phenomena are intersectioning. White privilege, white access, racism, gender identity, gender objectification, and poverty. In order to find a valid solution to the question of the disproportionate way sex trafficking affects the African American community, each of these phenomena must be taken on. The problems lie in the fact that most Americans see the typical sex trafficking victim as a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, juvenile prostitution, or Rusty as a black woman. Hatcher added, most people don't realize the two are the same person. I read that already. Let's see. On being vulnerable. For many, sex trafficking is a mostly invisible crime. The average American's exposure to the crime has been national media reports of recover victims such as Amy Smart in the movies Taken. While the notion of a child or a woman being grabbed from the streets or their homes is unlikeliness of happening tend to drive the imagination of those who would seem distant to the notion that sex trafficking is a serious concern. The reality reflects what it means to be vulnerable in America. From my experiences, traffickers are more likely to target girls with questionable family networks, teenage runaways, homeless girls, girls in the foster system, girls that can be easily piled away. Helen Taylor, the director of intervention and outreach for Exodus Cry, a Christian-based sex trafficking abolition program, told Atlantic Black Star, Taylor argues that when it comes to sex trafficking, America has a perception of the good victim, the white, typically blonde, typically blue-eyed girl who was taken from the street. That is blinded response efforts to the truth. The notion of the good victim has historically led law enforcement and first responders to interpret non-conforming victims to not be victims at all, but rather runaways or teenage prostitutes. I talked about this in an episode before. What episode was this? Let me go back to one of my old episodes. I believe it's called The Grim Sleeper. That's what the episode was called. It is. Let's see. The Grim Sleeper. Yeah. Episode is called The Grim Sleeper. It's episode 12. In episode 12 of The Grim Sleeper, I talked about a black serial killer that was basically taking advantage of victims in the Los Angeles area, and the big the center point between this situation and this article from Atlanta Black Star is that black women and women of color are considered to be not victims. They're considered to be willing participants. They look at them like they're criminals. And that's actually very problematic, and something has to be done about that. A lack of education, poverty, and having a criminal record are otherwise being prone to accept a large front-end enticement trend to make these girls vulnerable to traffickers, Taylor continued. The trafficker will go after the girls that will cause the minimal risk, who will slip through the net. Racism and misogyny play in a part to the buying of sex from these victims. These buyers are not the stereotypical lonely guy. They are married or have girlfriends, but they choose to buy these sex acts as an act of violence that dehumanize, humiliate, and hurt these girls. In the reflections of her life while being trafficked, Mimi Crown shared on her last day of captivity. The sun was shining, but there was still a darkness that surrounded my window, making it impossible for me to glisten. I sat on my hotel bed waiting for the next man to come in and use me like a rag doll. Then there it was. A heavy knock on my door, and I walked to open it. I told myself that he would be the very last man. Little did I know it wouldn't happen at all. Upon opening the door, there stood a short, nicely built man with the biggest smile on his face. We greeted one another, then I turned to him saying this: I know what you came for. I know I'm supposed to do right now. Collect my money and lay on my back just to be able to eat tonight. But I no longer care about the food or being able to pay for another night of this upscale to home. What I want is to go home. Her would-be buyer took pity on her and paid for her return flight home. Most victims are not as lucky. Okay. Let's take a quick break and we're going to go back further in this article. Very deep. This is Jeffrey Frazier from Black Wall Street Chronicles, and we're back at it again. We're getting deeper into this article by the Atlantic Black Star. It's talking about hyperpolarization in Kylie Jenner. I don't know what it has to do with sex trafficking per se, but we're going to read it further on. To a certain extent, those who would purchase sex need neither rationalization nor justification to make sense of their acts. However, one must be cognizant of the risk factors modern day life is presenting to African American girls. A recent example occurred when social media darling Amber Rose broke the internet by posting a bodiless full body pic of herself to Instagram. While Rose presented the pic as a feminist image in promotion of upcoming Slut Walk, by the time most people heard of the image, the meaning has been stripped away from it. What was left was a self-affirming political message after it completed its legal cycle was an overly sexual one. This proliferation of sexuality arguably has been raised expectations for a certain class of men. Among these men, women, or girls are increasingly being objectified as nothing more than sexual objects. This is best seen in the media coverage of Kylie Jenner. Jenner, at the age of 19, is one of the most photographed and Instagram women in the world. The problem with this is that she started her career at the age of 9. With Jenner admitting that she body-altering surgery, a key component of her brand is sexuality. This had created a pitched public debate on whether it's okay to sexualize a minor, even if that minor consented to being seen as a sex image. With social media being driven by the use of sexual imagery to drive traffic and followers, this hypersexualization is reprogramming the perceptions of some men. We see 3 trends associated with images. Kenyon University sociologist Sarah Merlin said to the PBS NewsHour, "It is now common to see more parts of the body exposed. There is more emphasis on the size of a woman's breasts, and the easy access to all these images had it made it all more acceptable to us. Shows like Toddlers and Tiaras are increasingly moving the bar of what is feasible to look at with a sexual perspective. This is creating a predator class for population, tweens and teenagers that were previously considered sacred. We as women should have the freedom to respect our bodies and celebrate our sexuality and womanhood. We are, however, responsible for the images we portray," Nicole Daniels added. Situations like Amber Rose may be excusable to some because she is an entertainer, but this is who our children are looking up to as role models. You can celebrate your liberation as a proud, beautiful woman, but this must be tempered by an effort to not allow yourself to be degraded to just being a sex object. What you may believe you're convenient is not always what is perceived. Where do we go from here? In Chicago, there has been an ambitious effort underway to reverse the narrative on sex trafficking, taking their cues from the fact that sex buyers are rarely punished in America's jurisprudence. Chicago's embraced a version of the Nordic model. What is the Nordic model? The Nordic model is a theory in sex trafficking policymaking, saying that those that have been prostituted should not be punished. Instead, the buying of sexual acts is criminalized, with offenders facing stiff fines and possibly imprisonment in repeat or extreme cases. One of the Swedish researchers that penned the protocol, Celise Hedegaard, shared why the model was drafted. "We spent several years doing fieldwork and we developed close relationships with the prostituted women," Daisy Elizabeth Circle translated. "We heard about their experience of past abuse, extreme poverty, and violence. We were prepared for these stories because our previous studies on the outcast and marginalized people. But what the women told us of their concrete experience of prostitution was unexpected and shocking. They told us what it was like to use their bodies and vaginas as rental apartments for unknown men to invade, and how this made it necessary to separate their body from their self. Me and my body are 2 separate parts. It is not me, my feelings, or my soul that he fucks." I am not for sale. With a minimum of 16,000 women and girls prostituted in the Chicago metropolitan area, according to Cook County Sheriff Office statistics, and with the 61.7% of those prostituted first exchanging sex for money before they are 18 years old. Cook County has a significant sex trafficking problem. Host of the nation's largest airport, the Chicagoland area has become one of the largest centers of sex trafficking and juvenile prostitution in this country, with 100% of all the women prostituted reporting receiving violence in some form, including rape, beatings, physical assaults, and threats involving a weapon. The Cook County approach differs from other law enforcement agencies in this country because this country commits to offering services to victims at the time of her arrest. Upon being identified as a victim in need by the Sheriff's Vice Unit, the Human Trafficking Response Team is deployed to extort the victim through getting needed counseling and other services, having adequate court representation, and receiving the resources needed to leave the lifestyle and successfully re-enter the community. Cook County has also joined other law enforcement agencies nationwide to go after sex buyers. The National Child Suppression Initiative, which ran from January 18 through February 5th, saw 101 alleged sex buyers arrested in Cook County, with 29 sex traffickers, 723 sex buyers arrested nationwide. The narrative about sex trafficking, however, will not change until behaviors and perceptions change, including that of the good victim. As a prosecutor, I dealt with the issue of the good victim and the bad victim respectively, Lauren Hirsch, National Director of World Without Exploitation, said to the Atlantic Black Star. There are definitely victims that are white with blonde hair and blue eyes, but most of the victims of the sex trade do not look that way. The idea of the good victim patiently flies in the face of anything that can help us combat this issue. If we are only talking about trafficking, we are not talking about racial inequality, and we are not talking about gender equality, and we are not talking about income equality. We cannot attack this issue. For years, the victims of these crimes were labeled throwaway kids, people that didn't matter too much to society. We're starting to come around to this, but there are still people out there who chose to look away because these kids may not look like their kids. We must continue to press this issue and make this issue relevant and heard. Adults and children who have been trafficked or sexually exploited should be treated as victims of the crime, not criminals themselves. Okay, that is the end of the article. I shall be back in about 5 minutes, and after the 5 minutes, I'm going to close out the show. This is Black Wall Street Chronicles, and I want to endorse black businesses. So when I come back, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do that. Thank you. up? This is Jeffrey Frazier of Black Wall Street Chronicles, and we're back at it again. Next week, I'm going to be talking about gender politics and societal double agents. That's going to be a good episode. Now, earlier I was talking about how I was going to endorse black businesses, all right? If you have a service or a product that you want to endorse on my platform, or Black Wall Street Chronicles, you can get in contact with me through my email. My email is jeffreyfrazier55@gmail.com. I'm going to repeat it again. My email is lowercase j EFFREYFRAZIER55@gmail.com. If you have any product and you have any service that you want me to endorse on my platform, we can talk about payment plans. Okay. Again, my Instagram is BlackKage840. If you go on my Instagram, BlackKage840, you'll see on my bios, you'll see my Twitch, you'll see my Facebook, and you'll see my Twitter. Also, the video, my YouTube page is Pain308 TV. Again, my YouTube page is Pain308 TV. I should say my YouTube channel, but you guys know what I mean. Again, my YouTube channel is Pain, PIN308 TV. Thank you very much, and enjoy your rest of your day.